All right, let's check out cookie stoichiometry because, or really just any recipe stoichiometry. Stoichiometry is when we convert from one ingredient to another ingredient. Obviously, that works when we're talking about recipes, but what about when we're talking about chemistry? I mean, are those still called ingredients? Well, usually we don't call them ingredients, but basically the reactants are the two things that you put in order to make something, which is exactly what a recipe does. Is you put more, sometimes more than two things in to make something. And so converting from one ingredient to another, or converting into how many things can you make, like a batch of cookies, or as it tells us here, 7 dozen, which a batch is 7 dozen cookies. And so all right, so let me walk you through a few of these, and hopefully this will help out clear out my daughter's change here on her table as she's taking it back over. But all right, so let's check it out. So here's the thing to understand. Remember, we've been doing ratios. Anytime you do a conversion, you need to know a ratio of two things that are equal to each other. There's always ratios, some ratio of two things that are equal to each other. So we've been talking about how 1 mole is the molar mass in grams, or we said 1 mole is Avogadro's number in molecules, or 1 mole is equal to 22.4 liters. Those are all ratios. It's just like you would say 1 dozen is equal to 12, right? Of whatever we're talking about. 1 dozen of whatever we're talking about is 12 of that. So like in this case, if I was to say you have 1 dozen cookies. Well, how many cookies is that? Well, that's 12 cookies, right? Okay, so you understand those are ratios. And so what a recipe is that a recipe, we have to recognize that each amount of every ingredient is 1/2 of a ratio. And the other half of the ratio is any other ingredient or information, like how many it makes, or what it is. All those are also simply ratios, okay? So the first activity that I have you do today on the click and drag slideshow is to simply take any two ingredients and make a ratio. That means you can choose any two ingredients. So for example, for every 1 teaspoon of salt in this recipe, you also need 1 teaspoon of baking soda. So a ratio would be 1 teaspoon of salt per every 1 teaspoon of baking soda. Also, we can do 3 cups of all-purpose flour. The ratio would be 3 cups of all-purpose flour for every 1 cup of granulated white sugar. Let's be honest, that was my nickname in high school, white sugar. But hey, we won't go into that. Funny stories another time. But another one is like 2 teaspoons of vanilla extract for every 2 eggs. And that 2 eggs is supposed to be separate. It's separate. I don't know why I wrote it on that line, but yeah, so it's a separate line. 2 cups of chocolate morsels for every 1 cup of brown sugar. But understand, it doesn't matter which 2 things we pick. Any one thing is equal to another thing in a recipe, okay? You can also use amounts, like for every 1 cup of brown sugar, we can make 7 dozen cookies, right? Or for every 1 cup of nuts, 1 cup of chopped nuts, 1 cup of nuts, it makes 1 batch. Because remember, all of this is a recipe for making 1 batch. So we can always equal any of this stuff to 1 batch. We can equal any of it to 7 dozen. We can equal any of these items to another item. Okay, so that's what you're gonna do. You're gonna on the click and drag, you're gonna go through and just make 7 other ratios. And then you're gonna, and then I'm gonna start, then we're gonna do some conversions with them. So let's do let me do some conversions with you. All right, so first off, let's get this first one. It says, how many eggs would be required to make 3 batches of cookies? Well, remember, conversions are always done the same way. You always take your given thing, 3 batches. So we wanna make 3 batches. And I'm gonna just abbreviate, okay? So it's totally okay to abbreviate when you're doing things instead of writing everything out. So we've got 3 batches of cookies, okay? It's asking how many eggs. Well, we have batches of cookies. What do we have to do anytime in a conversion? What's the first step is always to do what with the given unit? Get rid of it. It's got to go down. Doesn't matter what it is. It's always got to go down to the bottom. So we're going to put batches of cookies down here. So what unit do we want to change it to? Eggs. All right. All right, so now we know the units we're going to do, because we're going to end up with eggs. The unit you want to end up with always has to be on top. I'll put that up here. So now we're going to look. What's our conversion? Well, eggs. Where was eggs in our recipe? In order to get our equality, eggs is here. So remember, that's a little weird. So we had 2 eggs. So we're going to put our 2 up here with eggs. And then how many batches does this make? Well, you should just remember this by now. I mean, simply is that it's 1 batch. It's always 1 batch of cookies. So everything in this recipe makes 1 batch. So every 1 batch. So now you have batches of cookies cancel out. We're left with eggs, which is what we want our answer to be. Okay, so we take and multiply the top numbers, divide by the bottom numbers. 3 times 2 is, and I'm going to just write it right here so we can see it better. It's 6 eggs. All right, that's it. And there's your answer. Okay. All right. Let's slide down. Let me do, I'll do another one here. Let's go to number 2. I'm going to do number 2. Yep, that'll work. So, how many, you have 8 cups of flour. So there's our given amount. How many full batches? Okay, so understand that this, so we're looking for batches of cookies, but recognize we want full batches, so no part batches. Because when cooking, you can't make a 0.7 batch or 0.3 batch. No. That doesn't happen in cooking. Cooking, you can only make what you have enough to make a full batch of. So that's why we ask for, you have to round it here, and we'll do that in a second. So starting amount is 8 cups of flour. 8 cups of flour. Okay, cups of flour's up there. It's got to go where? Down on the bottom. Good job. Okay, we want to convert it to batches. All right, batches of cookies up top. All right, now that means we got to go back over here. Where's our cups of flour? Well, that was the first thing, so that's 3 cups of flour. Makes how many batches? And hopefully you remember that's always going to be a 1. Makes back. Everything about this recipe is for batches of cookies. Okay, so cups of flour is gone. We're left with batches of cookie. 8 times 1 divided by 3. And so we simply take an 8 divided by 3. And we get 2.6. And it's 2.6 is, the 6 is repeating. So that would, and that's batches of cookies. But this asks for how many full batches, right? Because in cooking, we can only make full batches. So 2.6, we can't have 0.6. So how many full batches do we have here? Well, instead, it's not like numbers where you just round it. No, it's you can only make what you have in the full full number. And so this is the full number. These are the part numbers. So we only can have 2 full batches of cookies. Right? Cool. All right. So so you're just going to take and you're going to insert those in. I did throw in the fact that, remember, 12 cookies is 1 dozen. 12 cookies is 1 dozen. So when you'll go here, you'll use that. Down here, as you go on down the page, I don't know, or you go through the slideshow and when you're doing them, you don't need 3 spaces. I don't know why I did 3 different ratios here, but you only really need 2 is the maximum you'll ever use. Sometimes you only need 1 in some of these, but anyway, but you'll just set up your ratio, multiply the top numbers, divide by the bottom numbers. Remember, whatever's on top always has to come to the bottom. Change it to something you change it to, then bring that down. All right, sounds good. Hopefully that helps out.